Welcome back to your aviation news recap. Today there is a lot to unpack, from a major new aircraft order to Emirates returning into the headlines when discussing the Boeing 777X and Delta route resumption news. Let's begin with Emirates. We know they've been publicly criticizing the Boeing 777X for some time, and now they're publicly calling for compensation from the American aircraft manufacturer Boeing following these persistent delays to the upcoming widebody. The Dubai-based airline remains the largest customer of the widebody jet. However, it also struggles to understand when the aircraft will be delivered and operational. That's a pretty big factor that needs to typically be nailed down. Boeing's 777X was initially slated to enter service in 2020. However, persistent delays spurred by its engines, initially the GEnX, encountering issues. Then we had a pandemic, internal issues at Boeing, and so much more have meant that delays have been experienced. On each occasion, Boeing revised the timeline with a new period on when the 777X would enter service, but ultimately missed that deadline on each occasion. After much deliberation from a public view, they removed the element of a timeline, believing it would be probably for the best. However, airline customers' long-standing expectations for some time now again has been a 2025 first delivery, which is now unlikely after many difficulties experienced at Boeing in 2024. Several major customers have shed doubts over that 2025 EIS, with the likelihood of this slipping to 2026 high. In fact, Emirates and Lufthansa have led these doubts. They have both pushed back at Boeing's 2025 hopes, calling them unrealistic given the manufacturer's current position, and looking at a more mid-2026 EIS. They're also arguing that Boeing is sort of more moving to this stance after some time of pushback. Now, though, Emirates is calling for the costs associated with the 777X delays to be compensated. Emirates is being forced to make several adjustments to how it operates, alongside future investments to cover basically for the lost capacity that stems from these aircraft delivery delays. We know Emirates has invested billions into a major retrofit program, which was always going to be required, but has had to be accelerated for the upkeeping of these aircraft that are going to play a more significant role than maybe was initially expected. Furthermore, Emirates is being forced to retain more aging aircraft types because their replacements cannot be sourced on time. This has financial implications. One of Emirates' toughest challenges remains the uncertainty surrounding delivery, the certification, and also just generally the entry into service. Just because certification is achieved at some point doesn't mean that then the aircraft is airborne with the airline customer the very next day. You may recall in the early 2020s, Emirates President Tim Clark had expressed his frustrations on a pretty continued basis with Boeing over its continued quality issues and associated delays. While several analysts deemed these frustrations as more than valid, there were question marks over the intentions over the very public claims. Despite, again, like I said, the public frustrations and even as far as threats by the airline to cancel orders, Emirates would actually go on to purchase more 777X jets in late 2023, which isn't that long ago. Analysts do argue that the airline basically looked to leverage its position of frustration and calls for compensation to secure a good deal on the widebody, which they still believe to be a very important aircraft for them. However, in 2024, those frustrations have once more returned, following a door blowout incident that sparked many new issues for the aircraft manufacturer. The 777 program seems to be on the back burner as the plane maker scrambles to sort out other business elements before it does move forward with this new widebody, which some people will have very strong thoughts about. You can let me know down below in the comments. Meanwhile, over to Turkish Airlines, who are inching closer to a landmark purchase of not just a narrow-body, but also a wide-body aircraft, according to the company. Boeing is the front-runner in securing the contract at this stage. As part of the prospective contract, Turkish Airlines is considering the 737 MAX and the 787 aircraft to bolster fleet and enable it to achieve its long-term growth ambitions, or at the very least, get it as near as possible. This order, which is in the final stages with only engine negotiations required, is also considered the second part of a mammoth order that first involved Airbus. The Turkish Airlines Airbus order that took place last year consisted of 220 jets, including several aircraft types from the A321neo to a very nice spread around the A350 family, which actually included every available option. That also meant the A350 freighter. However, even despite this pretty colossal order, the airline believed that there was more room for another large commitment, which was always seemingly destined to head the way of Boeing. For the longest period, when the company has discussed their future with regards to aircraft ordering, they saw one being for Airbus and one being for Boeing. But it is important to note that while the talks are described as being in the final stages, the airline still needs to negotiate the price of engines and source the best contract. As a result, there are delays in the final decision occurring, which is why they'll always say that the window could be slightly ajar for Airbus, so you can't rule them out fully, but it certainly feels like the 737 MAX and the 787 have long been the front runners there. In terms of the Turkish Airlines growth plans, which I think are worth exploring, they're pretty considerable. The airline says it wants to have a fleet of 800 plus aircraft by 2033. Furthermore, they want revenues to increase by almost 50 billion annually in that same period. On top of that, they want to contribute 140 billion to the Turkish economy by helping it grow. With such a large fleet, there obviously needs to be a large network to go alongside it. The hope is to have over 400 destinations and to carry 170 million passengers annually in the next 10 years. All these growth plans obviously represent a jump from their current stands, and to achieve this, they need all the available aircraft they can get. So Boeing being part of the future with this aircraft order is seen as pretty essential. The last story is Delta, who have announced they will resume non-stop daily flights between New York JFK and Tel Aviv from June 7th, so just in a couple of days, or potentially it has already recommenced, depending on when you choose to consume this type of content. The resumption on Friday does follow a period of suspension as the airline looked to monitor the escalating situation in the region. Delta will operate its Airbus A330-900, we know that to be part of the A330neo family, this being a mid-sized narrow body that has really seen its role in the Delta network gradually increase with time. The US carrier suspended services in October 2023. Initially, it saw this only as a temporary one, and it came following a risk assessment that was carried out internally at the company. As part of this assessment, the airline believed it was in the best interests of the crew and passengers to not continue operating to Tel Aviv. However, days after El Al's CEO commented regarding other airlines returning to the region being necessary, Delta has announced that it will recommence flights. That is going to conclude today's aviation news recap. If you've got any thoughts, well, you're more than welcome to drop them down below in the comments. Thank you very much for your support here on the channel. I hope you've been enjoying the regular uploads. Take care, and I'll see you same place, same time tomorrow for another aviation news recap.
And we'll fly.